So as you can see, trying to replicate the expertise of this snake charmer from India is no small feat. This gentleman is playing a double oboe, and the melody is basically kind of a fa, mi, fa, mi, re, do, te, do, with do, so, with a low drone down below. And that drone is really so, it's the fifth. The melody itself you might consider just a single strand of notes, monophonic, one sound at a time. But on the other hand, with that low drone, a double pipe, notice he's playing more notes than I can on this bagpipe chanter with one hand on one pipe. But there's actually a second pipe that's just playing that long sustain, like, you know, in Oboes by Zarathustra. And Oboes by Zarathustra is actually a do. This, I believe, is a so down below. But at any rate, one sound at a time, monophonic. Adding that extra sound down below, you might think it's a blended sound, homophonic, where you have melody and an accompaniment. Really a pretty simple accompaniment, but that's another pipe, two pipes. I only have one here. And these two pipes are activated by what is known as a reed, or reeds. The reeds are actually capped. They're inside. This bagpipe chanter is a practice for the bagpipe players of Scotland. And you can see within here, there is actually a little reed. I can take it out and play the reed by itself like this. Playing it totally in the mouth. Putting it on the chanter, we can get a variety of pitches, and the gentleman in this recording is playing a hexatonic collection. It's got 6 notes. Fa, mi, re, do, te, so, te, do, re, mi, fa, so, te, is really the collection there. Here we can get a little bit more, but of course I get 2 hands. And this is kind of on an F. And if I can do it correctly, I don't play this as a normal thing. There we go. Usually not played this way, although there are instruments in different parts of the world that are played like this. But the cap here goes on top and makes it actually a little easier to play, not so tickly on the throat, and a little louder. But again, we need the bag to be totally loud. And one more note back there with the thumb, these little thumb holes. So this is a double reed instrument and one of the 4 subdivisions of wind instruments, of aerophones. And we'll deal with these more as we go along, but this is kind of just an initial adventure into the subject. And of course, this fella had another disadvantage from me. His reptiles moved. By now we've used double in 2 different senses. This is a Western oboe, and it is a double reed instrument, but you wouldn't know it from looking at it in the case, because we'd have to get in the case from another direction and get out some reeds. And they're a group of oboe reeds. I'm not sure I like any of them, but we'll try them. Sometimes we soak them up in the mouth, sometimes we'll put them in a little bit of water. Double reeds. Sometimes an oboist will just say, my reed, but there's really 2 here. Can you see? Yeah, they're tied together. And it's quite an art form actually to make reeds. Your typical oboist not only plays, but is a constructor of reeds. The reeds are found in the southern part of France, I believe, but obviously other oboe-type instruments in other parts of the world will find their cane in other sources. So let's see if we've got either of these soaked up enough so it will play. Well, that's not very demonstrative. How about the other one? Oboists are constantly fussing with their reeds. That sounds pretty good. So, again, double reed there, as opposed to a single reed. And I'm assuming, it's hard to see from our oboist. We're just using the generic term, the generic Western term, for our Indian friend there, because it was an instrument with the reed in a cap, so it could have been a single. Well, let's let's put it under construction. So again, there's my oboe, a Larray, which is a fine make of instrument. Bit of a lineage to it. Not nearly in the range of a Stradivarius, but it's something. And here is an oboe that I inherited from somebody. This is a marching oboe, and I think it's got a metal bell there. So the oboe, contemporary oboe in 3 pieces, which we can put together. Here's the bell, and then see that? Flares out a little bit, not so much as the clarinet, which is a single reed instrument we're talking about. Notice a lot of keys. This is the lower joint. Hey, you got a joint. We got a couple joints here, man, and then the upper joint, and the reed would appear on the top of this. All right, let's throw it together. So here it is put together. You'll notice I still have the reed in my mouth. A lot of times oboists will do this during their rests in orchestral music, keep it nice and pliable. So put it all together, it sounds like this. And out of practice, what can I say? Started with a B flat. Grew up in bands. That's an indicia there. Lowest note on the instrument, that low B flat. Played you 2 octave B flats, did a chromatic scale down. Then I played you 2 octave Ds. And highest note I can play, let's see what we got. So that was an octave F up there. There is an F sharp and a G. Very hazardous. Well, maybe I'll do it for you some other time. Really hard. I've done them before. So here's my Larray, wooden, of course, oboe, in comparison to this strange metal antique oboe. And you might notice that the 2 joints at the bottom, the bell and the lower joint, are not connected. They don't even fit together. I just tried it. I inherited this from somebody. I think it was a former brother-in-law. Good guy. But I rather suspect that that bell joint is actually from a different instrument because they don't fit at all. Oh well. Notice all the keys to play quite a variety of pitches in chromatic scales to the present day. Chromatic scales being all the notes available in 1 octave: C, C sharp, D, D sharp, etc. So that's the notion of a double reed instrument. And those double reeds we've seen live so far have been pipes with holes drilled into them. And there's some holes you can see here. But notice we actually have a double pipe, so that our snake charmer friend there was actually playing not only a double reed instrument, but it was a double oboe. This, however, is not a double oboe, but a double clarinet. The difference between an oboe, which is a double reed instrument, and this instrument, clarinet type instrument, it has a single reed. And in this case, the reeds are carved out of the wood itself in just a single reed that vibrates. But notice we have 2 of them. And so this would be performed probably somewhat along the lines of what we saw with the snake charmer. Probably one of the pipes would provide a drone and the other would provide notes. But I have experienced, and we will later in the semester, an individual who is playing 2 melodies on the 2 different pipes. Marvelous. A Middle Ages selection. So let's take a look at those reeds. Or reed, shall we say, just looking at one of them. And notice how that has been separated from the main body. And this would be put entirely in the mouth and will vibrate. Let's see if we can do that. Kind of like a cigar. The other one. 2 at once. Yeah, so that's the idea. But these now are, shall we say, a folk clarinet. I think I got this in Egypt years ago. Let's take a look at another clarinet. And notice, fairly similar to the oboe, but its own entity. Western clarinet developed late Baroque, early classical period, which of course we'll get to. 5 subsections. And this now is that mouthpiece. It's got a cap on it. Let's take that off, one-handed. And there's the reed now. Notice very separate entity from the wooden mouthpiece itself. Once again, these guys need to be soaked up a bit too. Whoa. And now this one. That's about as good as I'm going to do. I actually started on the clarinet years ago. This is my dad's old Army instrument. He went into the Army and they put him in the band. He was unhappy, and he was relieved when they transferred him to the Field Artillery Replacement Training Center. They called it the Fart Corps. That says something about my musical background, doesn't it? There is an octave key in the back. There's 2 octave keys on an oboe. There's 1 on this. But it actually doesn't flip it up an octave. It flips it up an octave and some. An octave and a 5th. And the lower range of the fingerings correspond to the bassoon, which we'll meet, and the upper range actually corresponds to the oboe and the flute. Here's a comparison of the oboe and the clarinet. The oboe without the reed and the clarinet's reed facing away from us. And you can see the clarinet is a little longer, and indeed it plays lower notes considerably. And there's no justice in the world. It actually also goes higher. Oboe has about one of the most limited ranges of the traditional orchestral instruments, but it has its own charms. And notice they are both encrusted with keys so that other holes can be reached that you'd have to be an orangutan with long fingers to reach otherwise. And of course, with our snake charmer, we had 2 notes at once with the drone. And so we had intervals, relationships formed between the steady note and the upper notes. For instance, something along these lines. We had this interval. We had that. We had this. So it's time to talk a little bit about intervals. Oh, let's take it back to the old C major scale, shall we? And the intervals can be as simple as the scale degrees, right? We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, let's say 8 at this point. So here's a second, 1, 2. And intervals can be reckoned linearly, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, or simultaneously, 1, 3. Here's a 4th, a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and get ready for a 9th. But you could also say that, recognize our friend C there, and the C down there, you can do what's called octave reduction. So this is a 9th, but you can also say it's a 2nd plus an octave. And so in our snake charmer music, we actually had this. So we actually had an interval of a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, a 6th here, and a 7th. You might notice that despite the fact we've kind of transposed these things, some of those 3rds and 7ths were different than when we had it in the C major scale. And you guessed it, there'll be more to tell about that. Oh, and one more thing to talk about, the pitch language of the snake charmer is, once again, here were his notes. And notice, the melody a lot of times ended here, but we had the drone down here, and that's kind of like so, do, so that's where I'm maintaining that this is actually the most important note, the tonic. And if I take these 2 notes up an octave, we get, and I sang it outside. I sang it actually in the wrong key, by the way. I was doing it from memory, and so my drone so was different than the recording's drone. So sorry about that. That's what happens when you have relative pitch but not perfect pitch. But here are our notes in some sort of modal scalar order. And mode and scale are kind of synonymous terms for pitch collections. So we'd have do, re, mi, fa, sol, te, do, as opposed to ti, do. And notice this is a lawless scale. Ha ha ha. It's right out there. And that kind of scale, even if we put in a la, here's a la. That's actually an A mixolydian scale. It has a te-do instead of a ti-do. Everything is kind of normal. And admittedly, this was an A language, so we had black notes. This is A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A. Let's move it down to C just for comparison. And here's C major. But here would be C mixolydian. It's got the te-do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, te-do. That te-do instead of ti-do is a little, shall we say, bluesier, more mournful. And so sometimes I, at least, will call it a Mixolydian scale, Mixolydian mode, which is a mouthful, isn't it? By the way, Lydia was a district in ancient Greece, and the modes are often named after districts of ancient Greece. But in the Middle Ages, when the monks codified this stuff, they got the districts wrong. So a Lydian scale, and I guess a Mixolydian scale too, in ancient Greece would have been actually different than what we now call. But that's the way things go. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, te, do. Blues major, shall we say. Happy at the bottom. So, te, te, do. Definitely a little blues at the top. The gypsy woman called my mother. Oh, there's time to do that later.